Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of The Emma Gunn Show and a midweek instalment of Bullet Points. This is the midweek episode where we catch up with each other, where I let you know what's been going on and you let me know what you've been thinking about previous episodes. And I have to say, I have had so much feedback recently, so thank you so much to everybody who has taken the time to send in either an email, a DM, or even a voice note. I've just, before I hit record, listened to a voice note from someone on DM on Instagram, and it was so kind and it was so generous. And I thought, I'd love to mention it in this episode, but actually I need to think about it and get back to it properly. But fundamentally, one of the running themes that has been going through all of this feedback has been keep doing what you're doing, which for me, as the person creating the content, is really rather wonderful. So please, I cannot tell you how much that means. And even this DM, this voice note on Instagram actually said, I know you had a bit of a wobble in the middle of the year and you weren't quite sure which direction to go in, but it seems like you're doing the right thing. And my goodness, the sigh of relief, the sort of tension that left my body. So thank you. But let's start with something topical. And previously, I've always avoided things that are newsworthy because I've always thought it would be quite nice for the podcast to be evergreen. But I don't have skin in the game as such, but I wanted to talk about the Gregg Wallace controversy because it has been absolutely everywhere. It's undeniable that it's become a huge story here in the UK. So for context, Gregg Wallace is a television personality. He has been a judge on MasterChef, both amateur, celebrity, etc. MasterChef for, I think, nearly 20 years with a colleague, John Torode. And recently, some former contestants from the celebrity editions have come forward and said that his behaviour has been inappropriate. And as a result, he has stepped down, and it's just made headline news to the point where the two of the political podcasts that I listen to regularly, the News Agents and the Daily Tea, that it has been a topic of conversation in those sorts of podcasts. So to say that it has kind of gone viral is something of an understatement. And one of the reasons is because Gregg stepped down and then he did a video where he said, listen, the only people who complained were women of a certain age, middle-class women of a certain age, which was the dumbest thing that anyone could have said in the way that he said it. But there we go. But the reason why I say I have skin in the game to a certain extent is that I actually did some work with Gregg back in 2012, I think it might have been. I think I had just left OK magazine and I had been doing some bits and bobs with Weight Watchers. Now, long-time listeners might have a chuckle at that, but at the time I had very successfully lost weight through Weight Watchers, and I had just maybe I was just about to run the Royal Parks half marathon. And essentially I was in touch with the press office because of my position on a magazine. I had that network. I was in touch with them. They asked me to do a photo shoot in the magazine, which I did. And they also got me involved with this campaign with Gregg where we sort of like, hey, here we are in a garden doing push-ups. Here we are doing star jumps. Hey, I'm just going to walk into the kitchen. And while I'm walking to the fridge, I'm going to do some lunges. It was all very, you don't need me to kind of spell out the sort of theme that they were trying to go with. It's kind of, hey, incorporate really healthy habits into your lifestyle. And here's some diet changes you can make. So you get the gist. He's lost weight. I had lost a lot of weight. It was kind of given everything. Now, I also lived in Putney at the time, and Gregg had a restaurant there. And when I first went freelance, I would take my laptop there and I would go and work. And it was this thing that my friends made this funny joke about me always going to Gregg Wallace's restaurant. And on my birthday, I had a birthday there. My friends threw a surprise for me. They got him to write a card. So all of that sort of all mixed up into one thing. But I just want to say this, having worked with him in a professional context, I fully believe that he makes inappropriate jokes because I've heard them myself. And the sorts of jokes that somebody thinks that they're funny and the people who are in the room, instead of objecting, just laugh awkwardly and wait for it to be over and then hope that the next one, there's a bigger gap between them as the day goes on. It's just sort of, as I was saying to somebody the other day on DM who asked me about it, I said, it's just that sense of humour that's almost like an arrested development of a boy from school who still thinks that Willy jokes are funny. And I say this not in defence of Gregg Wallace, I hasten to add, because making people uncomfortable in that way is horrible. And I think, and again, they said this on the news agents, and somebody else said this in my DMs, the reason why it's middle-aged women who are calling it out is because by this point, we're pretty sick of it. If I had anybody speak to me or act toward me in the way that men did in my early career now, I would have none of it. It would be done in an instant. It would be like, who the hell do you think you're speaking to? Excuse me, when did I give you permission to? It would absolutely be stopped in its tracks because you recognize it coming a mile off. Whereas when I was in my 20s, when I was in my 30s, I didn't have that kind of power. I didn't know that it was possible for me to say those things, so I wouldn't have. So I have been in rooms with men that, high profile men, we won't go into it, who are highly toxic and known to be not very decent. And I would just say that on the scale of those sorts of men, Gregg is that sort of awkward uncle, or that sort of vibe, as opposed to those sort of really predatory, awful, horrible men who leverage your weakness or your discomfort or your lack of power for their own whatever it is. I think Gregg just likes to talk about sex and make those sorts of jokes. But the reason why I say that is because having spent that time with him working on that Weight Watchers campaign, I certainly didn't get any sort of sinister vibe. But isn't it interesting how the world has responded? I think a lot of women have got angry about it, partly because of the way that Gregg has responded, because I think it was all ill-advised, and partly because of the way that he has behaved, because I think we've all been on the receiving end of it. But it's not just about Gregg. I think it's about that whole context, that whole experience of feeling that you want somebody to stop saying something that's of a sexual tone and it will not stop. And you get more and more awkward, or you're embarrassed when you look back and you think about your younger self. I know I am when I think of the times I laughed or giggled or played along, because I thought that's going to be the quickest way for it to be over, rather than standing up for myself. And I think a lot of women are sort of reliving that feeling of frustration. And so it's conjuring up all of those things, but also just the terrible, terrible way that he has dealt with it. Equally, there's now an alpha male army who, while they don't have Andrew Tate, because I believe he's awaiting trial for human trafficking. I shall check my facts on that. If that's wrong, I'll put it in the show notes. But he's not a good guy. And it seems like I just went on Twitter, which was a mistake, for about 5 minutes, and I saw that people were saying, yeah, he's finally doing it. And someone else, no, he's finally doing it. Just like, yeah, he's not done anything wrong. God love Gregg. And equally, somebody said to me in DM, what about Nigella Lawson, who makes all these sort of innuendo comments when she's biting into a pillowy donut, or I don't know, something like that. And I kind of, I suppose I can agree. I think there's just the implication of intent. Like Nigella's actually like having an experience with the food. Nothing outside of the food, nothing towards a person is ever implied. And I think that's maybe where it all gets a bit grey. But let me know what you think about that one. And the reason why I was on Twitter, which I am coming off at some point, I just haven't got around to it, is because all of the videos of Gregg and I were on Twitter at one point, but I've searched and searched and searched and I can't find them. All this stuff about if you put something out online, it's there forever. Well, nonsense. Unless there's a detective who can find them, who's listening to this, who can find them. I can tell you that I have looked many times and they simply are not there. So, oh well, there we go. I shall just have to cherish the memories. Anyway, what do you think about this whole thing? I think it's another one of these things that's been so hugely discussed. It's this viral moment that it's going to have repercussions, I think, in workplaces. I would imagine there have probably been many offices this week where a woman has said, actually, so-and-so says the sorts of things that has been reported that Gregg says in the press. And it makes me really, really feel uncomfortable in the workplace. And I think it will open up a whole new dialogue, as these things often do. But have you experienced that? What are your thoughts on the Gregg Wallace thing? Okay, so this is an interesting one because I've been moaning about London a lot recently because I was in London today. I just find the experience less and less enjoyable every time I go in. And it's really sad because London's my town, London's my city, and I love it. There's so much about it I love. But there's also, when you look around, it's so grubby. It's so under construction. It's so dirty. It's so loud. It's so inconsiderate. It's simultaneously super fast and also achingly slow. And one of the things that keeps coming up time and time again at the moment is phone theft. And if you watch any of the morning news programs, if you look at any of the newspapers, if you go online, you can probably see footage and hear stories about phones being stolen out of people's hands as they're walking down the street, as they're standing at the bus stop. And it's horrible. I know so many people who have had their phone stolen. I have a friend who has had 2 phones stolen in the space of about 2 months and has said, that's it, I'm done with London because a child just stole my phone again. And it is really distressing. And I was talking to somebody about this at the weekend, just saying, it just makes me feel less like going into the city because I just feel like I'm putting myself into a war zone. And they said something really interesting. They said, okay, have you ever, because I was saying how when I go into London, I've always got my phone here and I never get it out. And if I need to use my phone, I go into a shop, or I'm very careful about how I use my phone, even if I just don't use anything unless I'm inside, and I might go into a shop and say, I'm not going to buy anything, but I just want to use my phone. I hope that's okay. And my friend said, okay, so you're so focused on what you're doing right, but why don't you just walk through London? Next time you go into London, walk through London and just look and see, if you were going to take somebody's phone, count how many you could take on your work from the station to where you're going. Just count how many phones you reckon you could get out of someone's hand. Look at it that way. Because then when you do that, you will see what the phone thieves see. And so today I was in London and I decided to use that technique, and I walked from Victoria Station to Oxford Street, Tottenham Court End, and I had to take the very long route because there was a changing of the guard. There was a state visit, so basically my usual route was completely cut off. So I was also walking at speed, but I got halfway to Oxford Street and I stopped counting because I got to 50. And I'm talking about people who were on FaceTime, holding their phones out in front of them, easy to knock out of their hands. I mean, I'm not talking about stealing people's phones. I just wanted to say this because I wouldn't quite know how to execute that. But I'm talking about if I wanted to smash a phone out of somebody's hand, I could have done. So really, unfortunately, loads of women, loads of quite young women as well, just walking along, looking down on their phone. I was walking just by Downing Street, actually. And I was walking through quite a small archway before you come out onto that road, Parliament Walk, anyway, near Downing Street. And a woman was walking towards me completely oblivious. And I was like, babe, look up. And I thought, not only was she about to body check me because she wasn't looking where she was going, but I could have had her phone. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. I don't want to get into the mind of a phone thief. And I started to worry about becoming like Agent Starling from, Silence of the Lambs. So I just decided to stop. But then on the way back to the station, I started the exact same thing. And again, it was shocking to me how many phones I could have just popped out of someone's hand. So the lesson there is, it's really easy. And I'm not suggesting any kind of forgiveness or any kind of understanding for phone thieves, because people work hard for their money and phones are very expensive. But if it's that easy, then of course London's the phone theft capital of the world. Of course it is. And there was a study, or there was some sort of, there was a study that was in one of the papers last week just saying that by far, I think the next one is either Barcelona or Madrid, but by far London is the phone theft capital of the world or of Europe. And I was looking around today, and with that shift in perspective, and I know I talked about reframing on the other episode, with that shift of perspective, I thought, well, actually, I can understand why. I can absolutely understand why. I don't think phone theft is right. I think it's terrible. I think it's horrible for the people it happens to. But when you look around, you can totally see why people are getting their phones stolen all the time. If you actually look up and look at the way that people behave with their phones in public, out and about, you can see why people would think, I need to do some phone theft. I'm heading up to London. Let's get up the West End, because you could have an absolute field day. So really, that's not about saying, hey, let's all start stealing phones. It's about saying how interesting it was to shift the perspective from, oh my gosh, I'm a potential victim. I'm so scared. I'm walking through London. I'm worried. Every bike that goes past might be someone who's trying to nick something, to shifting to, how are people behaving with their phones? And it was really eye-opening. So again, having just talked about reframing on the last episode, I thought that was really interesting and I thought I would share it with you. And because this is bullet points and we're not going to be here for ages, I just have one more thing to share with you in this episode. I was pretty sure I had two, but I've just checked my notes and it is just one. So, is your attention span a bit rubbish? I know mine is. I am finding it very difficult to focus on anything for a period of time. So, I went to see Love Actually at the cinema the other day. The beauty brand Vive, which is owned by Jamie Genevieve, had a brilliant Christmas party, which was just kind of come to the Electric Cinema, have some popcorn and a drink and watch Love Actually. And it was the first time in a long time that I've sat through a film without thinking about or looking at my phone. And I thought, gosh, how terrible it is that I'll sit down at home, I'll watch Deadpool versus Wolverine when it goes on to Disney Plus, and yet I'm looking at my phone within 20 minutes. How sad. And I've been aware of it. I had Johan Hari on the podcast. We talked about his book Stolen Focus, which talks about all of the mechanisms by which our brains are being almost forced into this short-termism, this kind of, I can only do something for a very short period of time. And well, anyway, it's a fascinating conversation. I'll put the link in the show notes because Johan does a ton of research. But I was thinking about one of the ways in which I could perhaps help myself. And I've stumbled across something. So here we go. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts. You know, I listen to The Rest is Politics, The Rest is Politics US, The News Agents, and my various Bravo catch-up shows. But I also love listening to an audiobook. And last summer, I went through a phase of listening to loads of celebrity autobiographies. The two standouts, or actually I should say the three standouts, Demi Moore, Matthew McConaughey, and Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman's autobiography is absolutely heartbreakingly brilliant, but he also does the voices. And there are people in those books, like when he does Michael Jackson, when he impersonates, but the guy is an absolutely incredible mimic. It is worth buying and listening to his book for that alone. But equally, his troubled childhood, all of those things. It's a really, really well done book. And unfortunately, I think Corey Feldman is sort of almost viewed as a bit of a laughing stock, and I don't think it's justified, and I don't think it's fair. He's actually, I mean, definitely when he was a younger actor, he was so talented and like the kind of person that you put on screen and he just pops out, and to really hear his story is quite heartbreaking, but also wonderfully told. Anyway, I haven't really engaged with that many books recently, and I was reading loads and then I just sort of stopped in March. And there's a book that I really want to read. My brother told me about it the other day. And in fact, if you are watching this on YouTube, I'm going to retrieve it from the bag from my Instagram reel. I did keep the bag that everyone told me to send back, but it is far too heavy and it is really for cars and aeroplanes. But there we go. But I was over with him and he gave me the copy of the book. He said, "Do you want this?" And I said, "It's called May Contain Lies." And hang on, let me put the bag down because it's totally in the way now. The title it's by Alex Edmonds, and it is May Contain Lies, and then the cover is a lot of redacted words, but the non-redacted words are how stories, statistics and studies exploit our biases and what we can do about it. My brother was talking to me about it and I thought, oh God, that sounds really good. That sounds really good, and the kind of thing I've sort of toyed with in this podcast about critical thinking and about not just believing everything you see or read, and how we can talk about so many things, but if you believe one false fact, you can then make huge decisions that might have a negative impact. Anyway, I downloaded the book on Audible because I have a subscription and I have loads of credits, and I keep teetering over pressing play because I thought, I know that if I take this on a walk, I'm going to lose track. I'm going to lose my place. I'm going to zone out for a bit, and then I'll probably miss something so important that then the rest of the book won't make sense because I missed out. It's like missing a day of school during a very important time. And so actually I'd thought about buying the physical copy, but then my brother said, "Do you want this one?" So actually what I've started doing is listening to the audiobook and reading along with it with the physical copy. Now, I know that might sound a little bit remedial and a bit like, oh my God, how old are you? But because I feel as though I have done so much damage to my short term or my attention span via social media apps and all of the very fast paced news that we are able to get our hands on, and which I enjoy hugely and use a lot, in order to be able to actually hold my attention, I can't just rely on my ears or my eyes. It's almost like, let's rely on both. And it's very much like reading in school, where I know that when I used to read in English, everybody used to have part of a chapter and then it would be your turn. And you'd be like, my heart would be beating out of my chest if it was the girl next to me who was reading. I was like, it's going to be me next. Let's hope there aren't any difficult words. But actually, it makes the information go in a little bit more. It's like when people say, if you want information to stick, write it down. I feel with books, with this kind of information, if I really want it to stick, and this is not a light book, this is not, there's a lot going on in here. So to keep up, I have found that listening and reading it at the same time is actually making it stick. So if you have felt like that and you've just felt like, I keep picking up books, it's different with fiction. I think with this kind of thing, with nonfiction, it's much harder. But if you keep picking up books and you think, oh my God, I've been turning the pages and reading the words, but I've been thinking about something completely different. I don't know what's going on. This might be the tactic you need to make that information sink in, but more importantly, to actually stay at the pace of and keep up with the story. So again, that's just a top tip. It's been working for me. I'm curious to hear if it works for you. So if it does, you know how to get in touch with me. I'm going to write all of this in the post for the episode that goes on my Substack. And there's been lovely comments and interactions on the Substack. One about the paper diaries. What were we talking about? About how I said that I'd forgot that I was going to do a December social media cleanse. And somebody said, I put Post-its in my physical diary, and quite a few people have got back saying, oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. Saying you hate parties. Like in January, when you get to December, you open the page and there's a note saying, by the way, don't forget that you hate going to 5 parties in a week. So do 2 max, that kind of thing. So those sorts of interactions are absolutely great. So subscribe to my Substack. You can be a free subscriber. There are loads of posts that go up for free, but there are also some that are behind a paywall. You can email me at office@emmaguns.com, or you can DM me on Instagram, where I am at emmaguns. Also, I think that's all the information you need. If you're on Spotify and you fancy commenting there, please do. But for some reason, I don't get any alerts, so I might manually go in and see. But whatever way suits you, please do get in touch. And just again, I know I said it at the top of the episode, but thank you so much to everybody who has taken the time to either comment or engage with my Substack post, who has sent me lovely messages on Instagram, but also all of the people who are taking the time to send me emails. I have to be honest, I have never had so much listener feedback from the podcast in nearly 9 years of doing it. And it's so validating. And I cannot tell you how much it means to me that people are taking the time to let me know their thoughts. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will be back with another episode very soon. What will we talk about then? Why don't you ask? Well, actually, I do know exactly what we'll talk about, because I put a Q&A box on Instagram, and I got loads of messages. So I think the next episode will be me responding to those, because a lot of them were probably not for Instagram, but can you talk about this in the podcast? So brilliantly, I've got loads of content for the next episode. But if you want to add your question to that, again, use any of the methods that are outlined in the notes. And if you are, I didn't even mention YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you like what you hear, you have any comments, please do comment underneath the video, because actually it helps the algorithm push it out to more people, which is obviously really lovely, because YouTube is very, very new to the Emma Guns Show. And I don't really know how to make Instagram work for me, but I know that comments and interaction are huge. At the moment, I think after a day or and a half, we've got like 50 views. So let's try and triple that. Let's see what we can do there. And I'm wearing a rather nice leopard print top from Albury. So if you want to see that, go over to YouTube. Anyway, thank you so much for spending your time with me. You know I don't take it lightly that you choose to tune in. I'm so honoured to spend this time with you. And I will see you on the next one.